Well, hello. Welcome to Gotham Sound TV. We are live with Radius, and I'm very excited to bring you Simon Davies.
Hey,
How are you?
very good, thank you.
And John House. John, how are you?
Great. How are you?
All right. We're here to talk all things Radius. So I guess to start off with, what is Radius for those that don't know?
Well, we started Radius very early part of 2023. I'm Simon Davis, like Peter just said, but we started it really it started as a man in the shed. That was me as an engineer, having made products for the best part of 25 years with Rycote. After leaving and spending a bit of time sort of like contemplating life as an engineer, went back into the garage and started tinkering with things. And from there, it led as a family to us deciding start again, and that's where Radius came from at the beginning of 2023.
And Radius was not your first company that you started. You have some other experience in the industry.
Well, I was an engineer out of school. I joined the Navy. I was in the Navy for 8 years, and then my mum, actually, who was the owner of Rycote in the early 90s, between my mum and my wife, negotiated me to, when we decided to leave the Navy, for me to join Rycote. So I joined Rycote in 1997 as an engineer, but really it was just my job to listen to my mum, sort of like stay out of trouble, help people. The job was basically looking after existing customers, making sure they had what they needed, making sure predominantly the workforce at the time was ladies at Rycote, and they knew what they were doing. So I was there as an engineer, production engineer, tea maker, phone answerer. But then really sort of like went up through the sort of like the stages of being at a family company, wearing multiple hats, and became the sort of head of engineering, design, technical director, and did that all the way through to when my mum decided that she wanted to sort of like retire and sort of step aside. So we then went through the process, my wife and I, of buying the company, and so we were there from 2010, all the way through till 2021, the end of 2021, as the owners. Well, we sold in 2018, but we were, technical director, but owner, all the way through to the end. So
It really was a family affair, continue to be a family affair. We were
oh,
talking
yeah.
how I think it must have been NAB or must have been NAB where we interviewed your daughter, who was working the stand, and you had mentioned, she had been there since the very beginning at like working the trade show booths.
100%. Yeah. Well, it was the same for me as well, to be honest. I mean, as a family, we were all, I helped in the summers, at the company. My brother, my sister, my mum, all of us had been there. My wife, and my daughters, and all the holidays that we did over the years tended to coincide with either IBC or NAB. And the kids who are now part of the new company as well were also, manning the stand at NAB. I think you could probably, call it, it's good use of family sort of like resource, I think. So, and also they would make products at home, as we all did, got product out the door. So, yeah, they've been doing it for a very long time. So.
Awesome. And John, tell me, how did you get involved with Radius, and what's your role?
My wife is British, so we moved back to the UK in 2013. Came on with Simon when he was at Rycote about 2014, just doing some consulting and product design. And over the years, more and more and more working together, it was finally obvious just come on full time. So we've been working together now for about 10 years. And I joined Radius last summer, once, I think, right after the initial kind of product launch in May, came on board to kind of help with the future of Radius from the summer of last year onward.
You're now back from the UK, and you're stateside, right?
Yes. So now I help Radius with kind of everything distribution, sales, marketing, and in a lot of cases with Simon especially, a lot of feedback from the customers. So I'll help feedback customer needs, customer desires, issues, requests, things like that. Um, and it's typically a very similar response every time where I'll have this great epiphany of, customer said they could do this, and here's a little drawing I made, Simon. And Simon looks at it and goes, okay. And then the next day he actually turns it into something wonderful and beautiful that actually works. So good relationship there.
Amazing. All right. Well, look, I think we should get into it. Radius. I'm gonna pick the RAD2, and I wonder if I'm just gonna start to unbox it a little bit. It is very elegant, and I wonder if you can tell me a few things about this that are not so obvious when I first pick it up.
The shock mount had to be the one of the pillars within the range of Radius, and it'll start to make a lot of sense when you look at the different hoops. When you look at the plan going forward in terms of the products, because we always, when we started, knew that we would be doing full systems and blimps, coming down the track. So
just to be clear, the current product line right now, if somebody wanted to buy a Radius product, is the
at the moment we do shock mounts mainly. As you can see, the RAD 1 and the RAD 2 are defined as interior, exterior, just purely by what you would put on the microphone, to prevent either the wind noise. If you're doing an interior and you're just booming, and you've just got a foam on there, obviously you need less in terms of support on the suspension. Whereas if you're putting front load like a softy or a Nimbus or a BBG type of windscreen, you'd need more support at the back because you're holding the microphone at the back. So, but when you look at the hoops going through, the current range doesn't include a blimp or any size, but that's what's coming, which then the only reason I mention it is it starts to make more sense as to why we design things and why they look like they do now, because it will fit into the sort of like plan in the long run when we do bring out the two versions of windscreen baskets. So, but when you look at the two there, left and right, you've got a reverse. The weight of the microphone is part of the load that's actually inside the hoop. So it's a very durable material that the hoop is made out of, but ultimately it's the geometry that makes it work. So if you were looking at it from the side, it would almost look like a long bow. So the microphone is brought back to the center when it's in motion. So it runs along the axis of the body of the microphone, but then always come back to center. But then on the pictures, you'll see they're very light blue in terms of the hoops, but then the one that you've got in your hand, Peter, are black. Well, what we decided, even though we did all the testing with the various different microphones from all the major brands, we decided that rather than just for us to test it and then advise what we think people should use, what we did, we put the different shore hardnesses inside the box with the hoops. So you've got a soft hoop in the box as well as the slightly stiffer one. It's in the little black envelope.
I see that. So that's in this envelope.
Yeah. So there's lots of things in the design that have been learnt from the various sort of years of mistakes and challenges with different other products that I've designed and made. So even when you look at the function of the clip that holds the microphone is separate to that of the shock mount. So we can have a very stiff, grip, very secure grip on the actual microphone, but the actual hoop we can make as soft or as compliant as we like. So that was always a challenge with a previous one when we used to make lyres at Rycote, where if you made a very soft suspension, the clip then became soft as well. So when you look at the clip as well, there's things in there that are very relevant. This is where my point about the blimps and the baskets come in, because there's a strap on there that. Sorry.
Wait, Simon, I'd stop you. Is that is the wall collapsing or is that a train outside?
It's a storm that's going on. Yeah, we're having a British winter here, so yeah, hail. So it's a bit scary out there. But yeah, it should ease off. Sorry, apologies for that.
So I got distracted. I do see that the hoop here is separate from the clip here. Is that what you were talking about?
Correct. Yeah. So the function of the clip and the function of the hoop are separate. So that then will allow us to do different clips. We'll come on to that later down, when we're talking about the clips and the new products. But it also allows us to do things like the safety strap on the clip, which probably isn't relevant to most people in location sound, production sound, but it is relevant to the broadcasters in sports and ENG, where it's very important that the microphone doesn't come loose when it's in the case, when they're rigging up, Formula One or, the athletics or the soccer and things like that. So that's where certain aspects of the design may not necessarily be relevant to everyone on this, who's listening in today. They're in production sound mainly, but there are parts that can be taken off, they can be removed, whether it's the strap or whether it's the part that holds the XLR, all of it, if it's not required, can be removed. But all of it is sort of like modular and adaptable, so you can use it for different setups, when we start using it with other products down the line as well. So
absolutely.
I was just saying to especially when you talk about this design, to Simon's credit, the geometry and the physics behind how it self-centers, and when you look closely at even the curvature of the hoops, because not only do they curve in one direction, but they have kind of a spiral shape to them. So all of that physics and material design from the tooling is something I think he just takes for granted because he knows it so well. And to that credit, it performs magically. And you can swap out any of the hoops, whether it be the Rad 1 with the Rad 2 or vice versa, and all the mics stay on the same center line. So it's universally adaptable on purpose. So you can adjust, fine tune, have a blue hoop in the front, a blue hoop in the back, mix and match, just based on your style of booming or the situation.
And I did definitely take for granted that these are not perfect circles, these hoops here. And I think, look, as much as we don't want to talk about other companies, we did talk in our rehearsal about the tremendous advantage of starting fresh. And I wondered if you could just say a few words about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you have designs that have been around for a long, long time, and you want to make cross compatibility or backward compatibility, that's a real positive, because if you look at the iterations of the modular windshield at Rycote over the years, and the modular was launched in 2003, so it's been around for a long time. What you're trying to do is maintain or keep customers, and so improving the product, whether that be by the materials or by the performance or just making something slightly better, is really good. But when we came into Radius, it was more about we could put things aside and say, no, we didn't need to worry too much about certain things because we can start with a blank piece of paper. And that was good, but it also meant that we could listen to people at the outset. Last year was a tough year for everyone, I think, and but it also meant that we had a lot of chance to talk to people and ask people questions about what they liked, didn't like, without the people feeling worried about upsetting me because I'd made Rycote products for years and years, and therefore they don't want to sort of tell me that they've already moved across to Sonella or using something else. So it was very nice and very liberating not to have to worry about that when we were talking about these products. So
I imagine it was liberating and terrifying and gratifying all at once.
Yeah. Very difficult. I mean, it's a strange time to launch a new brand as well. Let's face it. So, but I think it was. But it's very. Our product is designed to be silent and almost invisible. If it's doing its job, that's the sort of principles. And but if it's not doing its job or people don't like it, we're working with engineers as customers, which is wonderful but difficult at the same time. So, everyone has a valid point, and the point about the hoops being different is that when we used to do open days and have different shore hardnesses of materials for the lyres, there was very little consensus. Sometimes someone would agree about how they were using a Sherps in this rig, and then they would talk about the cables and they would talk about the setups. And that's the beautiful thing about working in the sound industry. And so that was nice coming back into that. And so not to have what was behind us as something holding us back. And also when you go down the route of IP and putting patents on products, it's great because obviously you're investing heavily into the designer stuff, but it also does pigeonhole you or sort of like corral you into using that IP when there may be a better idea of doing something else. And that's kind of what we've gone down the path of this time with Radius, where we know that there are better ways of doing things. And if that means after a few months or years that we have to change things, we're not going to be restricted by a heavy investment into IP to stop us doing that. So
right.
It may sound a little bit strange, but that's, you just make your choice early doors, as to which way you're going to go. And we went this way. So.
I love it. We are starting to get comments and questions. Thank you very much. Here's one. So if they can do some other hoops that are flat, because if we use a big windjammer, it's making a problem to fit.
I think I understand the question because of some of the feedback. So because the hoop potentially curves forward, depending on where that last slot of the mic is or where the capsule's at, and you put like say anything on the front, a wind protection, the flat surface now might come across that hoop. So this is where looking at the future, as Simon said, of the blimp comes in really handy, because at some point we have a goal of you not needing that front thing with the future of the blimp. There's other designs that we're also looking at slide-on wind protection that might also alleviate that. So there's kind of a transition between the existing flat capped slide-on protection that's available now versus what we may look at future solutions for that.
Got it.
So, and also there's a tricky thing and it depends on who you talk to from a boom mop or sound mixer. How far forward do you really want to position the mic, and how far away from that mic clip do you want the capsule or the last slot? And so some really want to have that center of gravity and kind of position the mic kind of right in the middle as best they can, in which case they may use softer hoops. Some, like especially someone I know up there in the New York area, Ken Strain, wants to push the mic as far forward as possible. So he'll even clip that back hoop on the XLR.
And it's really it's a balance between philosophy and physics, right? Because
exactly.
the closer forward you are, the closer to the actor you are, presumably. But also the less dead air in front of the microphone you have. Is that the balance?
Well, so I'll let Simon on this one too, but I'll mention the difference in our Nimbus slide on. Mm-hmm. You need a certain amount of room behind the capsule. Mm-hmm. So you don't get a lot of interference, right? And depending on that room, you may get just some slight coloration of frequencies, or you may actually get some air pressure differences. So when you look at our Nimbus, if you look at it from the end, we've got an end cap that has holes in it. That's the precise reason those holes are there, because we discovered in measuring that flat-backed rubber end caps, if they're too close to the capsules, do actually affect the audio quality. In some mics, it's not perceptible. In other ones, once you listen to it, and especially if you're doing sound design, you could notice some of those color frequency changes or some of the muddiness in the mic.
I think it's a good point as well. It's a very, very good question, because, and it kind of led us to one of the next projects that we started in terms of linking to the rad mounts, was the other problem that we're having, or not problem, challenge that we've got, is that when I first started, there was, you had the 416 and you had, lots of mics that are around the 250 mil length and, a fair bit of weight, but also a fair bit of body at the back of the microphone to clamp onto. These days now, You think about the rad one, and you think the mini CMITs, and the CS1s.
Yeah.
Everything's getting smaller and smaller, and what you want to grip at the back, if you want to put a microphone windscreen on the front, is getting less and less. And so you're challenging. You don't want it to nod and wobble around and flop around, but at the same time, you need to cover up and go beyond where the capture or where the interference slots finish. So part of the reason that we looked at the basket systems that then tie into the rad mounts, but not just the rad mounts, but also the larger one that we've got coming, was that you take out the influence or the impact of the windscreen on the actual microphone, so you can have as soft as possible or compliant shock mount, because you've put a windscreen around it, which then becomes a bit ironic because we're making a windscreen for interiors. So it's part of the reason for doing that was because of the sort of like the swing to much shorter, smaller microphones that are, less easy to grip at the back when you want to put something on the front. So
Exactly.
And one thing on that, the hoops are reversible. So you can make the curves curve inward instead of outward, and then you have more room to slide something on the front. And this is where the design comes in handy, because there's a slight physics change in that. So if you curve the hoops inward, you get a chance for a little more front sagging. So that's when you add a stiffer hoop onto the front. If you curve them inward because you're wanting to slide something really close to the mic clip.
Got it. And that sagging comes because of the weight towards the front, and so
Exactly.
therefore you compensate. Got it. And then we have a question from username Mars, not the planet. How is your shock mount option for the DPA 4017A or C with a bumblebee spacer or equivalent weight on it?
Whenever you are looking at putting weight on the front, if you look at the right hand side, the Rad 2, we call it a brace. It's almost like he's been working out, but you actually look at the hoops, the brace across the top and the actual width at the middle part of the hoops is wider on the Rad 2. For the DPA 4017A, I would be saying, if you're putting one of the bumblebees on the front, I would say you'd be probably looking at a black on the front and a blue on the rear, or black, just because of the with the A module, you've got quite a lot of weight in there, as well as obviously the front of the 4017. So, but to be honest, we've sort of like sent them out the door, and there's a lot of different combinations being used. Some people prefer soft on the front than they do on the back. So, when we were suggesting it was soft on the back, it was more from damping than it was, the actual the front hoop does all the heavy lifting. So, but the Rad 2 would definitely be that with the Bumblebee in combination with the 4017A anyway.
And I think while we're talking Bumblebee and other manufacturers' interoperability, these shock mounts are completely compatible with other manufacturers' products.
The hoops will definitely switch into Rycote products at least anyway. So you'll see them in the baskets. Yeah, there you go. You can see that, and that's just purely by chance anyway.
So they'll also fit in some of the road mounts, like the on-camera mounts. So any of the mounts that have the little square insert points, the hoops will retrofit in that. So you can get a set of replacement hoops, then you have an upgrade softer suspension for any of the mics.
And speaking of other products, there is a roadmap that you guys have. So it started with the shock mount. I also have this other I have this other product here, the Rad 3, which is a pistol grip version, which is really beautiful, actually. And so, but obviously, it's not stopping here. There's plenty other down the line that are going to be Radius branded products.
The first product had to be the shock mount, and because what was coming. The second project, well, we've got two almost running parallel at the moment, which is the Mini Alto, which is a basket system, which will be retrofittable to any of the rad mounts. So if you own a rad mount, or you want to buy one in the future, this can be switched in and out. So it's only, the tennis ball gives a bit of perspective, but it's only 85 millimeters diameter. So to give you relative terms, a modular from Rycote would be about 105 millimeters diameter. So it's significantly smaller in diameter, but using magnets and an adapter that will fit onto the rad mount, you have a two-part, windshield. It allows you to then do, booming inside, but if you wanted to, you can put a fur cover on it, which will come in the kit, to then use it for some light work outside. But really, it's targeting people who've got a lack of space, want to sort of like carry as little as possible in terms of weight, size, maybe be using the same mic for their interiors and occasional exteriors. So, but
this is the question about 4017C, I think, is very applicable to this, because when you have those mics like this CS M1, the Mini C Met, the 4017C, any of the short preamp mics, this is where this Mini Alto is beautiful, because you can have the softest suspension you need for that mic, and then completely enclose the whole thing, including the back end and the cable, within this kind of wind protection. So whether it be interior boom swing, boom swooshes, fans, air conditioning, any of that noise interior, this solves, a lot of those problems. And then, like Simon said, you can add a fur and get some pretty darn good wind protection for outdoors for any of those shorter mics as well.
And so is there like a mile per hour rating? I mean, how can people always ask me, like, well, at what point do I go from just the blimp to the fur? Or
there's probably no real answer, because you've got a direction of attack and other things. However, based on what he's designed, it's all about acoustic transparency without a fur cover on it. So this is why, the smallest ones, looking at interiors for some of those really sensitive mics, shines, because you can cover the whole mic. And as long as you've got enough ceiling room, and you're okay with putting a really small full kit over it, you'll get a lot of transparency using this over maybe some thicker fur material.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's right. I mean, the idea behind the Mini Alto is multiple layers that you can choose to use or not use depending on the situation. So any windshield manufacturer will always dodge the question about miles per hour.
Yes.
I mean, you can only remove the wind that exists, so when people claim huge dB reductions, you need the wind to be there in the first place. So okay, you can generate it yourself by swinging it on a boom pole, but it is comparable to the diameter of the windscreen determines the physics of the dead air space around the microphone capsule. So it's not going to be as big, therefore not as sort of like good as, say, like a larger diameter basket, but it allows you the ability to very quickly, because of the magnets, to strike it and take it off. We're even doing an attachment that allowed you to put it onto a carabiner, to put it onto your shoulder straps if you wanted as well. So things like that it's more about listening to the people using it and watching the people using it, rather than saying this is going to be the thing that solves everyone's problems, because physics determines the performance of the windscreen. So it will give you very good protection. The larger system that we've got coming, so this one's called the Mini Alto. The Alto will be more of the conventional shape, sort of size, coming in the end of 2024. That will again be a little bit more of a step upwards, and what people will be used to in terms of diameters of, like things like the Rycote modular, a little bit smaller than maybe the Rode blimp, but that's very, very conventional. And being very honest, that's going to go down the route of sports OB, even though it's very quick and easy to open, and use for production sound purposes. The shape of it fits with the workflow, where 12, 20 or so of them will be put into the back of an outside broadcast truck, for the football or for the athletics and things like that. So,
and one of the keys, I think, you mentioned earlier about people having time to have discussions with us over the last year, was you could really get the sense that people wanted to have their voices be heard. And some of the design came out of that as well, I think, because when you look at sound design, for example, if I'm putting a windshield blimp on a stand, do I need extreme handling noise and extreme isolation for it to be on a stand? Probably not as much as someone who's booming.
So when Simon talks about the difference between OB and location sound, is that one of the considerations? Is will it go on a pole or will it go on a stand for audience or soccer,
100%.
football?
And and I mean, you've got all levels, right? You've got people who are doing documentary style. You've got news gathering. Again, you've got sound design. So, you know, when we look at each one of these types in isolation, for instance, with sound design, if the wind's crazy and they're trying to record bird sounds, all they're going to get is noise of trees being blown around. So there's a certain level of wind protection they need, but once it gets over that, they get blown out. So it's about taking each one of those styles and use cases and then saying, how do we create something that solves their problems and get the right trade-offs to solve each of those problems? So some cases, the trade-off is we need better handling noise, less wind protection. And in other cases, it's we need less handling noise, better wind protection. And that's kind of where that roadmap and seeing, you know, the future of the products and working backwards and creating each one of the links in the chain that you need to create first to make sure they work with the second and third and fourth link that's going to come.
The MKH50, I hadn't realized how popular it was for interiors. So
MKH50 clips.
Obviously it'll fit for 60s and 70s and the other ones when we come the baskets coming down the line as well. So we're calling it the MKH50, and we'll also be doing dedicated rad mounts for certain microphones, including the 50 as well. Yeah, coming in March and April. So.
On a personal note, that was my favorite. That's my favorite dialogue mic.
One of the other feedback is, can we get the softer suspension in all black hoops? And that's another thing that will be coming as well. So there will be an all matte version of every one of the mounts available.
Awesome. I see Megan Davies' request for a quick release, and there it is.
It's a very simple product, but it's one that. Even though, just to address any worries if someone's looking at it and saying there's a bright blue thing on the end of a boom pole, if you see on the right hand side, it looks like a slightly smaller version, but that's where it's locked in place. So the blue disappears underneath the tip when it's actually in use. So
if somebody wanted to volunteer to be a beta tester, can they reach out to support at Radius, or how does that work?
Yes, as many as possible. I mean, because we're doing this with a view of this being around for a long time. So the more that we can see from different people's user experiences and everything like that, the better. We've got a closed Facebook group, which the team thinks is really funny because I run it, and there's over it's approaching 600 people, I think now. So, you can reach out and contact us direct, or go through to the Radius closed group on Facebook, and that's wonderful because the more, like I said, when it's a silent product that just does what it's doing and it's invisible, you just don't hear from people. But at this stage of the development, we're all open, to tweak things. We are still very niche when it comes to manufacturing. We make it all here in the UK. But we're tooling things up where we can. Some of the products that we first showed in May last year were all 3D printed. So we've got the ability to do very low volumes on items on the development. But when it comes to beta testing, the more the better. I mean, it's uncomfortable when you put yourself out there and you let your baby out into the world in terms of showing your product, but when you get discussions about whether it's about how a product works or how a product looks or even new ideas, unless we're listening, we're never going to move forward. So but the Facebook group is the first bit.
I want to run through some of the comments that we're getting. One is from Equivox. I'd love a pistol grip with a shock mount for handheld recorders. Would make it so much easier for them carrying out and about. And that's certainly some criticisms I've seen in terms of handling noise on some of the smaller recorders, where for sure a pistol grip would help out, and a shock mount.
That's I can't promise a win on that, but I can tell you we're already starting the process of getting some of the new fur covers for the portable recorders. It's kind of an evolution of when we can get to that because there's such a great need for some of the current stuff we're working on that.
And
It's
then copy that. And Peter Post says, I'm a camera guy and I'd love to see a solution to mount a rad mount on a camera cage with a NATO mount, for example. Would you consider this?
Yes.
And
Well, we've got actually on that note, because we're very much outright sound community, you know, and we've got some good friends at a company, the founders of Wooden Camera. They've started up again on Mid 49. On the sort of like theme of sticking to our lane and being sound related, where we don't know very much about, you know, all the various different frames and things, and all the cameras that are popular out there. We've been working with Ryan and Elizabeth, and we've got a cold shoe mount coming very shortly. We've got one that I think goes on to 15mm rods as well. So, but their expertise has been fantastic. So they're basically modifying or using a Rad 2 mount that goes onto those sort of things. So all those suggestions, yeah, very welcome, because you know we're kind of admitting that that's not our field of expertise. A little bit on the portable recorders as well is quite a challenge, because they've sort of like moved on in the last 3 years as well about how people use them and what people are using. So open to all the you know, if someone asks a question, they're using something, yeah, we would always look at it. But like John said, we've got a slight challenge in terms of the size of the team, in terms of getting stuff out the door, and with the current projects as well. But yeah.
no, that's brilliant, and I didn't know that the relationship between Mid 49 and Wooden Camera, and that's fascinating, and I'm glad to see you focusing on that market as well. That's great. Peter's point about a NATO mount is well heard on my end. Just having, you know, shooting those NAB videos, and the quarter 20 is not quite cutting it for trying to do that stuff.
Sure.
One of the points, Simon, that you mentioned was that you are UK manufacturing based, but for those people watching this in the United States, there is, well, John is a representative of the company and he's here, plus there is local distribution or national distribution here in the US.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's a massive part of what we, you know, where we're doing the product and the customer service, in terms of that's been the huge thing. You know, the product has to be good, but also the product has to be available through the right people as well. So Reading Audio now fantastically agreed to be our distributor in the US, which means, you know, the product will be available, you know, and it's priced right, you know, for the US market as well, which is yeah, it's great, because we, as a small brand, you know, starting up, you know, from the garage and everything like that, we weren't expecting to be where we are now as quickly. So we're just trying to sort of like walk before we run, but at the same time, having the right distribution is massive. So,
yeah. And the focus on that, as Simon mentioned, for us is that customer service, that support. So if we get great distribution partners, then we can answer all the questions. So if you send us a Facebook message, an Instagram message, LinkedIn, website, it's going to be myself, Simon. Like, we are literally the ones answering the questions about the products or about how things fit. And it's one of those, if we don't know the answer, we literally take a note and say, we need to make that. And we try to give that feedback to let all the customers, all the people who have questions know whether we can do it, whether we can't do it, time frame, but just really give them that direct support of, it's coming straight from the horse's mouth. We're the people who are touching the product. Simon's the one who's designing it. And any questions we can answer, just know that it's us directly answering those questions whenever you reach out to us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll leave it with Rob Johnson's comment, which is fantastic company and good people running it. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. And thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to talk to our audience. And thank you for watching, everybody. Take care.